All right, hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Deep Dive with the Rhode Island Coalition for Israel, or RICI for short. We're a nonprofit made of Christians and Jews with the mission to combat antisemitism or Jew hatred, educate about Israel, and promote our shared Judeo-Christian values. This podcast is produced on the Ocean State Current and is a bold exploration of the issues shaping Israel, America, Rhode Island, and the future of Western civilization. It's hosted by me, Maria Friedman, Executive Director of RICI, and this podcast brings clarity to complex topics so that our viewers have the knowledge and confidence to engage in informed discussions. Our podcast also expands the conversation beyond what you hear in the headlines. Rooted in Judeo-Christian values, we showcase the grassroots partnership that we have between Jews and Christians working together to combat Jew hatred and confront the BDS movement through education and advocacy. We're leading candid discussions that challenge false narratives and provide historical, moral, and strategic contexts. From community voices to national thought leaders, this program amplifies perspectives often overlooked. We deliver news and views designed to turn the tide in Rhode Island and beyond. So with that, I'm really pleased to welcome our special guest today, Ari Brown, who is an education analyst with CAMRA, an amazing organization, Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting and Analysis. That's what CAMRA stands for. So Ari, it's a pleasure to see you on today. I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself, tell us about your background, and tell us more about CAMRA. What is it and what do you do?
Thank you for having me on the podcast. I am a education analyst, like you said, at Camera. Um, that means that I'm responsible for reviewing curricula and other teaching resources that we see that come to us and or that we find, and determining whether they have any anti-Semitic material in them, any anti-Israel material in them, that is inaccurate material that's inaccurate, that is biased against Jews in Israel, and then trying to help parents and teachers um, in the communities that are dealing with these problems in their schools, get those curricula changed, those resources changed, and fight against any type of issues that they may be facing. My background, I went to Yeshiva University. I graduated with a degree in history. Then I was a history teacher in Jewish day schools, and for a few years before joining Camera in our education department.
Wonderful. That's amazing. And could you explain a little bit more about the organization CAMRA, what you all do, what's your mission, and why is it so important in 2026?
Yeah. So the Committee for Accuracy, Middle East Reporting and Analysis is it's what CAMERA stands for, is organization whose our main focus is on combating inaccurate reporting, as the the name would suggest, about Israel and the Middle East. We've been around since the 80s, doing this work, and you know, as I'm sure that many of the people in the audience know, we there's a lot of anti-Israel bias in the media, and Camera has been at the forefront of combating that bias, getting corrections from the media, trying to really change the narrative for the better out there in the media. Several years ago, we expanded into education, founding the education Camera Education Department, mainly focusing on K through 12. Camera also has a campus department that supports students on college campuses. Um, um, but what the education department, what our Camera Education K through 12 is on, fighting against anti-Israel bias in the school curricula that is unfortunately quite rampant.
That's an incredibly important mission, especially in this day and age with so much misinformation and myths. And, that is something that we are working on the ground here in Rhode Island to empower people with accurate information about Israel. So we have very often shared resources from camera to people who participate in our educational programs so that they can better detect misinformation. So before we go into the problems that you're seeing in the education system, I just want to hear like why are you personally invested in this work? What drew you to this work, personally, what it means to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was when I started teaching, I was teaching in Jewish day schools, and I've always been, I'd always been, obviously, passionate about supporting Israel, and combating, anti-Semitism. And I'd known about camera, um, and I had kind of, I had wanted to, for a while, although I greatly, I enjoyed teaching, I had wanted to be more involved in the kind of behind the scenes side of things, working with curricula and me. I wanted to get a little bit out of spend some time out of the classroom. Um, and when I saw, and then camera, um, was provide when Camera had the education department, it provided me an opportunity to continue working in education to support Israel really directly by helping Camera to with work on curricula, putting out putting out our resources and critiquing resources that are already out there.
That's wonderful. And it's great that you have this background as an educator too, because I think that I'm sure you're able to understand this work on a deeper level because you know what it's like being on the front lines teaching too.
Yeah, that was another thing, that the idea that it's not so easy to find people that are actively teaching who want to go out of, get out of the classroom and then start doing this work in education. And so, I think it was important to support this work, to be somebody who has that experience teaching, even if it's in a Jew, even though I was in a Jewish setting mainly, I didn't personally deal with, the anti-Zionism in the schools that I was teaching in, but you know getting coming out of that and helping being able to use my experience, my expertise, um, um, to help support the fight against anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism was a big deal for me.
That's wonderful. So you, as an educational analyst, are focused on the K through 12 system. Can you tell us more about that system and what types of anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, or even anti-American curriculum are you seeing, and how pervasive is this issue?
Yeah. So that's kind of that's the important question. And I think that there's some misunderstanding as to what exactly the issue is, the challenge is. I think it's common to think that what we're dealing with is a few bad apples. There's a couple of teachers maybe in every school district, maybe in some school districts that push an anti-Israel agenda in their classrooms and are trying to indoctrinate their students. But unfortunately, what we see is there's really a systemic um, issue. There are systemic issues in school, in the education world, in school districts, in curricula, and they keep on cropping up. We see them consistently every time. So, um, you know, for example, this is just a general example. You'll see things like the land of Israel is always referred to as Palestine, even when it's not appropriate, even when it would be anachronistic to name it. So, like like when you're talking about the ancient kingdoms of Israel and Judea and Judah, and then suddenly it says, oh, the Israelites came to Palestine. This is an anachronism. It's not correct. It should be called either Canaan, or you can call it the land of, or to call it the land of Israel is more accurate than to call it Palestine, which is a term that comes out of Greece and is applied and then is applied to the region by the Romans following the Bar Kokhba revolt.
Right. Right. And I
So
just want to stop on that point because that
yeah.
is so important for our viewers to understand that there has never been an official country called Palestine.
Yes,
I will personally give somebody $5,000 if they can find, a Palestinian coin from the past or name a leader of Palestine because there hasn't been one. And like you said, it was this term that the Romans started using in order to be perpetuate, I guess, their anti-Israel ideology or
it
how would you
well,
frame that in order to
yeah. So it was so when the Hasmonean kingdom, the dynasty kind of falls apart, comes the land of Israel falls under the sway of Rome, and Rome absorbs the region and as the province of Judea. There are the Jewish revolt, the Great Revolt that culminates in the destruction of the Second Temple, 770 in the year 70. Then, so, a few generations later, there's the Bar Kokhba revolt in the 130s, 136, 137. After that, the Romans had kind of had enough of the Jews. And so they renamed the province to Syria Palestina. It's interesting, it's a bit unclear where the term Palestine, where they got that term. So, it was the official, legal name of the region at various points, but it was never a sovereign. It never, as a sovereign state, was called Palestine. As a sovereign entity state, it was once the ancient Israelites show up in the land, after in the going back, you know into the 1000s BCE, it's pretty much the only people who ever had sovereign control over the land are the Jews, the Israelites, the Jews, and not anybody else. It was always, whenever it was called Palestine, it was when it was under the rule of a colonial power, whether it was Rome or the British in more modern times. Um, like I said, the term Palestine itself, there's actually some interesting speculation. So that it actually is a Greek translation of the word Israel. So there's a scholar who was at Brown University, who wrote a paper about the origin of the term Palestine. So Herodotus calls it Palestine. So it doesn't originate with the Romans. And what he speculates is that, if you read in the Bible, the term Israel first shows up when Jacob fights the angel, or wrestles with the angel in the book of Genesis. And before the angel leaves, Jacob asks the angel to bless him, and the angel says, "Your name is now Yisrael, Israel," and then the angel then explains, because you have fought you have fought with powers, or with God, it says. But in this case, the word Elohim in there, that context, means powers, because he's an angel, not God. And the ancient Greeks liked, rather than transliterating the words of foreign countries like we do nowadays, they actually would prefer to translate what the names of these foreign countries meant. So when Herodotus was writing about the land of Israel, the scholars suggest that he was using the term Palestine, which in Greek, palaistes is to wrestle. So um, that is a potential origin of the term Palestine, which would be kind of ironic considering how it's used nowadays, if true. But it really comes to prominence when the Romans officially named the region Palestine after the Bar Kokhba revolt, purposefully to sever the connection, not to call it Judea, not to call it Israel.
right. So, going back to the schools, you're saying one of the main things that you're seeing in many of the school districts is incorrect referring to this land, which actually is Israel, but they're
Hmm.
using this term Palestine. What else are you seeing?
Yeah, I think that's a very specific example, but maybe to zoom out and take a more, generalist view, and what's the overall problem that's faced. Because I think the overall problem is not just about anti-Israel or anti-Semitism. It's really that the world of education is heavily influenced by an anti-Western, anti-American agenda. Camera recently released a report onto in the about the about the Philadelphia school district. And this is what it was revealed that the curriculum in the city of Philadelphia schools was reorganized from being teaching chronological order to teaching themes, and those themes are things about racism, settler colonialism, and essentially arguing that the America and the West, which Israel is a part of, um, promote these what they are presenting as these promote these evil ideas where the West is racist, the West is settler colonialist, and just to discredit it into towards students, and so discrediting Israel, so talking about another specific example, more than the terminology would be that when you get to talking about the state of Israel, you're talking about the state of Israel as European Jewish Zionists coming in and colonizing the land and stealing it from the indigenous Palestinian Arabs. So, and that's all part of this broader anti-Western, anti-American agenda in the that we see throughout school curricula. But particularly, just our most recent report, just to not to toot our own horn, but is you see that in the Philadelphia or in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think this is an extremely important point because it's creating this false binary for students, like good and bad, right? The colonial and the non-colonialists, right? And like you said, it's framing Israelites or people from Israel or Jewish people as these white colonizers. And I think this harkens back to some of the shortcomings of Holocaust education in America in that it kind of teaches students, hey, there was these Jews living in Europe. They were white, they were, Polish and German and this and that, and they were doing fine. But then Hitler came to power, exterminated them, obviously slaughtered 6 million of them. But they recovered and they did get their own state later, and everything went back to normal. But it does paint Jewish people as just like white colonizers when that's not true. Actually, a majority of the people in Israel are technically people of color. I mean, some are Ashkenazi or European Jews, but not all. And they certainly didn't colonize because you can't colonize a land that is yours. Israel is the indigenous homeland of Jewish people. So if you believe that and you believe that Israel has the right to exist, you are a Zionist. And obviously, Camera and RICI are both Zionist organizations, and we are proud of that. But yes, I think it creates this false sense for students that, okay, Israel's the bad guy, colonial power, but then I'm sure they're also criticizing America too. And they become kind of part of this anti-Western movement that we're seeing, which is, again, more broad than Israel. And that's why these conversations are important because we want people to wake up that this is happening all over the country, including Rhode Island. Some of this anti-American sentiment is infecting the schools, and thank God Camera is actually trying to do something about it. And so how pervasive would you say this issue is? Like, you know, I don't know if you guys have numbers of like how much percent of schools are experiencing this, or do you have any idea how to measure how pervasive this is?
Yeah. So, it's hard to tell because the thing about the K through 12 education in America is that it's very decentralized. So every school district is doing its own thing. So, it's hard to say, but to say exactly how much over, across all of America. But I think that people would be surprised how widespread it is. And I think what we need to understand is that it's never in a school district where it's a problem. For example, in Philadelphia, it was not a couple of bad teachers because that's how you may think it because you see, when you initially start looking at it, you see a couple of repeat names that come up. But once you dig in, you realize, no, 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 this is everywhere. This is the entire way that the school district is choosing to frame its education and social studies. Um, And, and we see, in whenever we go into a particular district or a particular school, and we've looked in not just in Philadelphia, we've been in Northern Virginia, we've been in Connecticut, in Massachusetts, where camera is based. Camera is based in Boston, so right near Long Island, Rhode Island. I'm sorry. We see that it's a pervasive issue. It's an issue that is really trying to infect the whole curriculum. And it's not to say that every history teacher is some kind of radical ideologue. That's not true. Many teachers are well-meaning people who just want to educate their students. But when say the state standards are framed in a certain way, when the curricula that they're asked to teach, them are framed in a certain way, when the textbooks are written in a certain way, that is going to impact the type of teaching that is given, even by a teacher that doesn't mean to distort and wants to really do a good job.
Definitely. So on that note, how is this type of anti-American and or anti-Israel curriculum getting into the classroom?
Yeah. So there's two ways that it happens. One way is directly from a teacher from a radical teacher. So you could have a teacher that is an ideologue that wants to discredit Israel, that wants to demonize Israel in the classroom, and they bring into their lessons this type of anti-Zionism or anti-Semitism. The other way is kind of from outside, that there are organizations that, for example, just one example would be the Zin Education Project. That is, they're just not just anti-Israel, they're anti-American. They're going to bring their overall, they're coming in with their resources, their curricula, and trying to get that adopted. And you'll see this also come, or maybe from a teachers union that could be trying to influence. So we had in Massachusetts the Massachusetts Teachers Association, after October 7th, started developing its own curricular resources and attempting to get those adopted in various schools. So you can have like schools of education, colleges that are providing instructional materials, and those instructional materials are biased against Israel. So either it's from, I guess you have like a bottom up where it's the teachers themselves, or from the not even necessarily from the top down, but from the outside coming in.
Right. And more of that on the outside. Can you speak to, other countries, for example, Qatar, that are influencing curriculum? How are they doing this? And help us follow the money, because that's what it's about.
Yeah. So to be clear, the money side of things is not so much camera education's focus. We tend to be more on the actual content and critiquing the actual content. However, um, the Qatar Foundation gives, tens of millions of dollars to definitely schools that are training teachers, universities, schools of education, teachers, colleges. You see also coming from Saudi Arabia, that fund educate that try to influence and to fund teaching in America. But to be fair, to be honest, that's not our main focus.
Right. I still think it's important
It
for
is. It is. No,
people
no,
to be
that's
aware,
yes.
right? Like,
Yes.
because, I think the average American isn't aware that we have so much foreign influence in the
Oh
classroom,
yeah.
K through 12 and universities. Um, I was reading somewhere, and I don't know if this has come up in your work, but I was reading somewhere that Qatar was funding a lot of schools in New York. I don't know the name specifically, but to the point where they got them to replace world maps in their classroom, and Israel was not on those world maps.
Right.
And
Right.
that is just so scary and heartbreaking to hear, but that's probably the tip of the iceberg, right? Because they're perpetuating other anti-American or anti-Western ideas on top of that.
Right. So, for example, a university like Georgetown, this isn't necessarily specifically related to education, but Georgetown, which obviously many people that go into foreign policy go to Georgetown, and Qatar has great influence in Georgetown. They've given vast sums of money to Georgetown. Georgetown even has a campus in Qatar, in Doha. And so, this is just an example, not even necessarily specifically related to education, where a foreign country hostile to Israel is influencing our education as well, and that's a higher education, but it is happening in K through 12 as well. And yes.
Right. Right. And could you speak to any, if you know of any specific examples of this happening in Rhode Island schools? And if not Rhode Island, maybe one in Massachusetts that you could point to?
Yeah. So in Rhode Island, we have not gotten to Rhode Island yet in terms of curricula. I think actually a good example is Fairfield, Connecticut, also close to Rhode Island. So in Fairfield, Connecticut, um, we have reviewed material relating to, for example, the various heritage months. So, we have right now it's African American Heritage Month, and there's, right, where Fairfield, Connecticut is where a teacher in Fairfield Public Schools is promoting resources for these months, which even in where it's not the Arab American Heritage Month or the Muslim American Heritage Month. So African American Heritage Month, trying to push an agenda that trying to get resources that are about the Middle East, about Arabs, about Islam into Asian Heritage Month, African American Heritage Month, Women's Heritage Month, even so things that months that you wouldn't think where this would be relevant, and so we're trying, and it's pushing that agenda in that, and you can see that kind of influence in that case.
Right. And I know, isn't it May that's Jewish American Heritage Month? Is that right?
Yeah,
Is there
yeah.
anything that people should know about that, or is there any ways that camera can help boost
So
that?
we actually have resources for Jewish American Heritage Month. They're on our website, camera.org, and then we have a button on the website that takes you to our K through 12 um, resources. And we have Jewish American Heritage Month re resources. And this is one of those things where, people who are, organizations that want to push, that are anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic, they won't say they're anti-Semitic, and they'll push, a kind of anti-Zionist Jewish American Heritage Month type of agenda. So to try and separate Judaism from its roots, connection to the land of Israel and things like that. Or,
And we're always reminding people in case they're not familiar with that term. But again, if you're an anti-Zionist, that means that you don't think Israel has the right to exist, and you don't think that Jews are the ancestral indigenous people of Israel. Obviously, we are Zionists, but it is alarming to see this rise of anti-Zionism in education, especially when it's led by fellow Jews, right? Like you and I are both Jewish, and I know that it hurts both of us personally when we see people trying to speak for all Jews and saying, "Well, I'm an anti-Zionist," and I just think it's so sad because, we live in America, right? Like I can still criticize the American
hmm
government, and I might not agree with everything that they do, but I still think America should exist, and I'm still a proud American at the end of the
hmm
day, and so I try to remind people of that when they say that they're anti, Zionist or just kind of jump on the bandwagon without really realizing what it is. But I did want to ask you more about like what pushback you're receiving, like what pushback maybe you're getting from administrators, teachers, other people you're working with, or just other obstacles as you face this work.
Yeah. So what tends to happen is when we review a curriculum, or we review some issues that are whatever issues they may be that Jewish students or the Jewish community is experiencing in a particular school district. Um, the first step is to try and say to the school board, the principal, hey, there are these problems. Can you address them? And the pushback is that you know sometimes they do. Sometimes the school district doesn't realize that there's a problem and they do want to change, but a lot of times they don't. And they simply will stonewall you. They'll simply ignore you. They'll just say they'll dismiss it as, it's just a small problem. They don't want to they don't want they're not going to change anything. At that point, then it becomes necessary to kind of really put much more public pressure on on these districts, on the schools. And that's where the people in the community in that district itself becomes very important because that's who can really affect can affect that kind of a change.
Yeah, that's great. And what does that like engagement look like between camera and the community members?
Yeah. So what we do is we review the material. So we provide the parents with the facts and the analysis of the curriculum of the textbook that is in question. So that they can go to the principal, go to the school board, and say, here are the problems with your resources. And then the other thing is that we can advise the parents, we provide them with strategy to be able to effectively advocate for themselves in their communities.
That is so, so important. I can't underscore that enough. Again, it's empowering people with the education and knowledge of what is going on, right? Like, because there is,
Mhm.
unfortunately, this anti-Semitism or anti-Israel sentiment happening in our own backyards. Our children are being indoctrinated with that. And so I love that you guys are doing something about it. And of course, if this comes up in Rhode Island or nearby Massachusetts, RICI would love to be involved in that because we do engage with community members on issues like this when it does, come up, and it has. And I know I didn't write this down as a question, but I wanted to bring back ethnic studies and just ask you about that because ethnic studies, for those that don't know, is a really harmful initiative that has kind of spread its wings all over the country. But what it seeks to do is require students, in this case, in Rhode Island, there was a bill proposed for making it a high school requirement before graduation, which requires the students to study about certain ethnic groups. It's usually like African Americans, Pacific Islanders, and other minority groups that are specifically named in these pieces of legislation, usually. But the problem is going back to your earlier theme, is they tend to have an anti-Israel viewpoint and frame Israel and America as these evil white colonial entities. And so it's really painting us, when I say us, I mean like Western democracy, Israel, and the US in a bad light. But students, don't realize that. So it's really a dogmatic discipline to its core. And it has been, at least in California, it has been implemented in some schools, and it's resulted in catastrophic lawsuits of anti-Semitism and Jew hatred all across the board. And so those school districts are dealing with that nightmare because they mistakenly allowed many like outside groups that are anti-Israel to basically supply those curriculums that all of a sudden became requirements. And so last year in 2025, that was a bill introduced in the Rhode Island House, and we testified, RICI, we gathered community support and testified against ethnic studies. So far, we're good. In Rhode Island, it has not become a requirement, but I want to hear from you how that has come up in K through 12 in different instances, and what should people be aware of in terms of ethnic studies?
Yeah, so this is the thing to understand about ethnic studies because I think when you hear about it and how, oh, there's this question about anti-Semitism with regard to ethnic studies, you think, oh, well, why don't we just include Jews in the ethnic studies and then it'll be fine. But the problem is that that misunderstands what ethnic studies is because it's not simply, oh, let's educate people about different ethnicities. That's not what it is. Ethnic studies is the idea of having specific ethnic studies requirements in K through 12 is based on this idea of intersectionality, This idea that there are all these everybody has these different identities, and you combine the identities, and that tells you either how powerful or how marginalized a given group or person is. And the reason why you have ethnic studies is because you say, oh, there's all these marginalized groups, and we need to essentially elevate those groups. And this is the thing in that ideology, Jews and Israel and Israelis are low, especially compared to Arabs and Palestinian Arabs. And so any conception of ethnic studies is going to naturally have a critical eye towards Jews, towards Israelis, towards Israel, because they either are white or white passing, you might say, and Israel has all this power. They're the powerful. The Palestinians are the weak ones, and so that's who's marginalized. And so there isn't really a conception of ethnic studies, um, that is able to be not anti-Jewish because of the various ways that it interacts with in the kind of um, constellation of intersectionality. I think that makes sense.
Yes, it definitely makes sense. And again, I know California is just a easy example because it was a requirement there, but this whole liberated ethnic study initiatives, I know that there was an organization called Teach Palestine,
Hmm.
which coordinated a lot of the curriculum that was chosen for that. And many of those members, also were at the forefront of anti-Israel protests in California at different schools and have, gotten students involved in that, which I think is crossing the line. Um, and just have received funding from, again, foreign foreign actors and countries in order to perpetuate that in America. So it's definitely something that people should be aware of, and I'm really glad that Camera is fighting that too. I did want you to ask to, highlight a story of a recent win in your work. Like, tell us something good that happened.
Yeah. So the recently the House Education Workforce Committee announced investigations into three school districts, that being Fairfax County, Virginia, Philadelphia, and Berkeley, California. And two of those districts, those being Philadelphia and Fairfax County, the investigations were opened on the basis of our research. So we were able to provide the research to Congress to get those investigations open. So that's a win. In the state of Georgia, Camera reviewed their state standards, and in the teachers' notes on the state standards, there was a bunch of inaccuracies with regard to Jews in Israel, and Camera was able to get the state of Georgia, Georgia Department of Education, to make I think over 20 changes to those teachers' notes, and that's affecting over 1.5 million students in the state of
Wow.
Georgia around.
That is incredible. That is
Yeah.
incredible. And I hope that Camera will also prioritize coming to Rhode Island and analyzing some of our schools. And like I said, Ricky would definitely work with you all on that to garner community support. And that kind of was leading to my next question is just how national groups like Camera can work with grassroots orgs to make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's very important because things we're a national group. We cannot be everywhere. We can't be everywhere at once. We can't know what's going on in every state, in every school district in the country. And that's why it's really the people in the community who are the ones who are going to be the ones fighting for their communities, fighting for their schools, not to have this terrible material there. And we're there to provide support. So if you are in Rhode Island in this case, and you know that in your child's school, you know that in a school there is anti-Semitism, there's anti-Zionism, you can email us, schools@camera.org, and we will be happy to we and then we can try and provide whatever support that we can. We also have on our website, like I said, camera.org. You click on the K through 12 tab, and there you'll find all of our resources that can be, I think, would be very useful to somebody who's trying to deal with these issues.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. Again, if you're a parent and you are concerned about these things, reach out to camera. Maybe if there's enough concerns, you could, funnel some of your organization resources to investigate it. Obviously, more evidence is better, but also if you are a school board member and you're concerned about that, I think you obviously garner a lot of power too to influence decisions. So get involved with camera, not just for Israel's sake, but for America's sake. Because
Hmm.
again, it breaks my heart to see these college students and young people getting involved in anti-American protests, anti-American sentiment, I feel like is growing. And I think obviously we're a free society and you can disagree and we have freedom of speech, but I think this anti-American dissident is a really disservice to society and it could lead to civil war, which we're always worried about. But just in general, it just pains me to see young people growing up in America hating America so much. It's like, well, if you hate America so much, then why are you studying here? Go somewhere else. Try to live in any of the Muslim majority countries surrounding Israel for a day and see how you do because those countries aren't democracies. They don't have freedom of religion, freedom of expression. Women don't have the right to vote. In some countries, they don't even have the right to talk in public. And so it's just, again, highlighting this hypocrisy of these, so-called woke social justice warriors all over the country that think they know everything about the Middle East. They became experts right after October 7th, right? But they really don't know anything about the politics or history of Israel. And then again, this is now infecting the curriculum. So
Yeah,
anyway,
and I'll just add, like you mentioned, school boards. Run for your local school board if that's an ability. Like that's very important. Like that's one of the biggest. That's one of the major things that somebody could do in their community to try and make a positive make a difference is to be get on the school board. That is really like number one.
right, that's so true. And also just it's impossible for us to know what is being delivered in every single classroom in America, right? We don't know everything that these professors or teachers are saying, but again, I think it's important to monitor like their social medias and things like that. I know that Camera has done that before as well. And we've also worked with camera in some of your colleagues in other capacities that are
Mhm.
like following what's going on at the universities, specifically Brown and things like that. And many of these teachers are posting really harmful things on their own personal social media pages. And so I can only imagine how that extends to the classroom setting. Has that come up for you at all?
That
Just like social media posts by specific.
yeah, that is actually a major like a good way to figure out like is this teacher or is this administrator or school board member somebody who is are they an anti-Semite, are they an anti-Zionist? Like a lot of times they'll tell you that you can see on their social media. That's where a lot of the evidence can be gathered, can be gleaned. Yeah.
Right. Um, yeah, is there anything else that you wish people would know about this topic as it relates to your work, K through 12 education and this anti-Israel, anti-American stuff that you're seeing, or is there a question that you wish I asked?
Um, I think that in the I think that people, they know. I think it's important for people who want to advocate for Israel in education to really be knowledgeable about the history of the Jewish people in the land of Israel. I think that if you want to go ahead and be an effective advocate, you know, there's a lot of people who are really well-meaning and want to advocate, but they don't necessarily have at their fingertips the facts, and the history. And I think if people would know what the real history is of not just of the conflict, the direct conflict we're dealing with that's been raging for the past 100 years or so, in first the British Mandate and now in the state of Israel, but even before that, and understanding the deep roots of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, their continuous presence in the land of Israel, and the all of the ins and outs of the Zionist movement and the creation of the modern state of Israel. I think that would allow people to be even more effective advocates than they are currently, and also for a student, for a teacher, to be knowledgeable about this subject.
Yeah, I totally agree. And on that note, I encourage people to get involved with the Rhode Island Coalition for Israel because we have done educational programs on this topic, giving people background on Jewish history and things like that. We've partnered with Dr. Andrew Pessin, who's a nationally acclaimed expert on anti-Semitism, and just walking us through, the history. Also, like a lot of people just don't know about all the Muslim, groups that have conquered different lands, right? And so it's important to learn that history alongside Jewish history so you can understand where we're at today. And so reach out to us, get involved with our educational seminars, some of which are online if you're not in Rhode Island, and some of which are in person. Also, go to Camera's website. It's camera.org. I'm looking at it right now, right on the front page. There's that report that is exposing the anti-Semitic radicalization in Philadelphia, but there's also really great news articles that are constantly getting posted there exposing BBC, CNN, all these different news sources that are, again, reporting on Israel in an inaccurate way, that is really doing damage to Israel's PR and America's PR in many cases too. So I encourage people to look at that website, stay up to date with Camera, follow their social media. You guys have great posts, and I do share them often too to the RICI social media, which is at RI4Israel, the number four. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, and then of course check out
Yeah,
Camera sites.
it's Camera, and we're across all social media platforms. We're at Camera for Truth. Camera, the number four, Truth.
Perfect. See,
So
we
that
both have four, so that's easy to
yes,
remember. RI for
yes.
Israel and Camera for Truth. Follow us on the social medias. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Yeah, just in terms of just to get into more specifics about our educational resources. So we do reports like like the Philadelphia report, but of other problematic materials or publications that are education related. We also put out one-pagers on important topics relating to Israel. So a one-pager about, say, the idea of settler colonialism and how it relates to Israel, summing up these issues in a concise manner so that you can be educated and you can go into a meeting, say, with a school board or with the principal and explain to them why these things are, what these issues are all about and why it matters for the Jewish community.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Ari. It was great to hear from you. I congratulate you on your work, and I'm looking forward to continuing our partnership with Ricky and Camera and working alongside you. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. Until next time, I'm Israel. Hi.